Why do some people walk into a room and the room listens? They don't speak louder. They don't dress flashier. But something about them is undeniable. It's not charm, not confidence, not money. It's rebellion, not the dramatic, angry kind, the quiet, internal kind. The kind that says, I know who I am, and I'm not asking for permission. Friedrich Nietzsche called this the will to power, not domination, but creation. The force behind every magnetic leader who dares to live by their own values. In a world of imitation, rebellion is clarity, and clarity is power. Today, you'll see why. Why rebellion isn't chaos, it's leadership in disguise. They told you rebellion is dangerous, that standing out is risky, that blending in is the smart play. But they forgot to tell you this. Every system built by conformity is eventually changed by someone who refused to conform. Nietzsche saw it long before we did. He believed the future belongs to those who create values, not follow them, not rebels without cause, but rebels with vision, with strength, with clarity. In this video, you'll learn how to use that inner defiance, the part of you that says, I don't buy this, as a source of authority, not alienation. We'll unpack Nietzsche's core insight, reveal what modern psychology says about why rebellion attracts attention, and give you 5 battle-tested tools to lead without asking for permission. If you've ever been told to tone it down, stay quiet, or not rock the boat, this is the exact moment you stop listening. Because leadership in today's world doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being unmistakably, unapologetically yourself.
Nietzsche's will to power, the philosophy behind magnetism.
Friedrich Nietzsche never wrote a rule book for leaders. He didn't leave behind a list of 10 habits of highly effective people. What he offered was more dangerous and more useful. He gave us a mirror, one that shows who we are behind the politeness, behind the masks, behind the social approval we chase. And in that mirror, Nietzsche saw something primal. He called it der Wille zur Macht, the will to power. Not power over others, not political control or brute dominance. Nietzsche's power begins with something internal. The deep, often painful urge to grow, to surpass what we are, to become who we might be without asking permission. This is the beating heart of rebellion. Not the childish desire to break rules, but the adult decision to build your own. Most people, Nietzsche observed, live in quiet obedience. They adopt the values handed down to them. They go to school, work the job, follow the trends, speak the approved opinions, not because they believe, but because they are afraid to be seen. He called this the herd instinct, the mass desire to avoid shame, to belong, to not stand out. On the surface, it looks like safety, but underneath it breeds resentment, mediocrity, and quiet despair. The herd tells you, don't be too intense. Nietzsche replies, become who you are. Here is the turn. The rebel, according to Nietzsche, isn't a teenager screaming at authority. He's not a chaos agent. He is a creator. The rebel is someone who has suffered, questioned, broken apart, and rebuilt themselves with their own hands. They do not reject society to destroy it. They walk away to design something more honest. Nietzsche calls this higher type of human the Übermensch, often mistranslated as Superman, but it's not about being better than others. It's about becoming better than your former self.
The Übermensch refuses second-hand values. He does not accept morality simply because it's taught. He tests it. He breaks it open, and only then does he decide what to keep. This is rebellion as creation. And it's magnetic for one reason. Most people are starving to see what authenticity looks like. In a world where everyone filters their personality to match the trend, the rebel is like oxygen. Nietzsche believed that when you live according to your will to power, you radiate a kind of force. Not aggression, not arrogance, but clarity. People sense it. They may not understand it, but they cannot ignore it. There's a passage in Thus Spoke Zarathustra that captures this idea with poetic violence. You have your way. I have my way. As for the right way, the correct way, and the only way, it does not exist. This isn't moral relativism. It's radical responsibility. You do not borrow meaning. You create it. Let that sink in, because it's the starting point of magnetism. You don't become powerful by mimicking power. You become powerful by taking full authorship of your existence. Now think about what this means in your life. When was the last time you made a decision because it felt true, not because it was expected? When did you last risk being misunderstood to be honest? When did you last say, "This is my path, and I will walk it alone if I have to"? That's Nietzsche's rebel. Not the loudest voice, not the flashiest image, but the one with the deepest roots. This rebel leads not by force, but by presence, not through charisma, but through conviction. And in a world obsessed with image, conviction is rare, which is why it's magnetic. So here's the core idea. Nietzsche's philosophy isn't a call to be reckless. It's a call to be real, to examine every belief you inherited, to break what no longer fits, and to rebuild yourself into something that cannot be ignored. Not everyone will like it. That's the point.
The psychology of rebellion, why it works, and how to apply it. Why do some people, when they stop trying to fit in, suddenly become unforgettable? It's not luck. It's not manipulation. It's psychology. When someone dares to break free from the script, it triggers something primal in our minds. We watch more closely. We feel something shift. We lean in. Let me explain why. First, there's confidence. Not the loud kind, the kind that doesn't flinch. When someone acts with conviction, moves, speaks, and decides without needing approval, our brains register it as power. It's not logic. It's instinct. Psychologists call this the conviction effect. When someone seems certain, we tend to believe they know what they're doing. We follow not because we agree, but because we feel drawn to the strength behind their clarity. Nietzsche's rebel, they don't wait for applause. Their clarity comes from something deeper. They've already fought the internal war. That's why they don't need to perform for the crowd. Second, there's authenticity. True, raw, unpolished authenticity. We live in an era of hyper-curated identities. Everything's edited, polished, filtered. But authenticity, the kind that says, "I know who I am and I'm not for sale," that's rare. And scarcity creates value. People trust those who seem real, not perfect. That's not an opinion. It's measurable. A study in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that people consistently prefer leaders who were consistent with their values over those who were superficially charming. Now combine that with emotional asymmetry. This one's subtle. It's what happens when someone refuses to play by the emotional rules of a room. You know that feeling when everyone's pretending and then one person speaks with uncomfortable honesty? You feel the air shift. That's asymmetry. The rebel creates tension, not to be dramatic, but to be real. And in that silence, people listen more carefully.
because most of us are starving for real. And when we see someone living it, even if we don't understand them, we're drawn in. It's magnetic. Let me tell you a story. There's a man, let's call him Darren. Quiet, reliable, works hard. But no one notices. At meetings, his ideas are ignored. His presence is tolerated, not respected. Why? Because he's always agreeable, always smiling, always available. Then something shifts. He stops nodding along. He speaks slower, says no more often, leaves when he's done, stops apologizing for things he doesn't mean. At first, people resist, but slowly they start looking at him differently, asking what he thinks, seeking his input. His energy feels different. He didn't grow louder. He just stopped being someone else. That's rebellion. It doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it's ice. Still, unmoving, unapologetic. Here's another story. Camilla was the top student in her law class. Everyone expected her to go corporate. She didn't. She launched a small nonprofit teaching legal rights to underprivileged teens. She wasn't chasing prestige. She was following conviction. And while her peers got titles, she got meaning. Years later, the same institutions that laughed at her started inviting her to speak. She wasn't loud, but she was clear. People respect that, not instantly, but inevitably. You see, Nietzsche never promised comfort. He promised transformation. When you rebel against the herd, not out of anger, but out of alignment, you disrupt something. You show others what they're afraid to face, that freedom is possible. That's why it's magnetic. Let's go deeper. Your brain is designed to ignore patterns. It filters out the familiar. But the moment something unpredictable enters, a voice that doesn't match the room, a gesture that breaks the rhythm, it pays attention. That's neuroscience. Your mind can't ignore contrast. When you choose to live by your own values, especially in a culture that rewards obedience, you become that contrast. Not everyone will like it, but they will remember it. And that's the price of power. Not popularity, not applause, but presence. Of course, this isn't easy. You may lose some people, some comfort, some temporary peace, but in exchange, you gain something rarer, respect, especially from those who secretly wish they had your courage. Nietzsche knew the cost. He died misunderstood, even mocked, but he also wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow." If your why is strong enough, the discomfort becomes fuel. Look around today. Rebels are everywhere, but only a few are magnetic. Because rebellion without values is noise, but rebellion with purpose, that's leadership. Think of Elon Musk. You may disagree with him, but you can't deny his impact. He disrupts not for fun, but because he believes the rules need rewriting. Think of Malala, a teenage girl who risked her life for education. She didn't scream. She stood firm. Her stillness was stronger than any speech. Think of David Goggins. He doesn't sugarcoat, doesn't play nice. He tells brutal truths because he's lived them. People listen not because he's soft, but because he's real. Each of them is different, but they all share one thing. They broke away, not to destroy, but to build. Now ask yourself honestly, where in your life are you still pretending? Where are you shrinking to be accepted? Where are you choosing peace over power? Rebellion starts in those quiet places, the meeting where you finally say no, the relationship where you stop pretending, the project you quit because it no longer fits. It doesn't have to be dramatic, but it has to be honest. Maybe you don't need to scream. Maybe you just need to stop explaining. And here's the most practical insight. When you start living like this, people don't just notice. They reorganize around you because you become a reference point, a signal that something else is possible, that maybe, just maybe, it's okay to be real again. You don't have to change the world, but you can change the room you're in by refusing to disappear inside it. So what would it look like if you stopped editing yourself? What would your day look like if you led from alignment instead of fear? Because the world doesn't need more copies. It needs originals with scars. Up next, I'll give you 5 practical tools to help you start. Small steps, real steps. No theory, no fluff. This is where rebellion becomes strategy.
5 tools to become a magnetic rebel without burning everything down. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to fight to be powerful. And you don't need to destroy everything around you to be a rebel. What you need is structure, precision, intention. Here are 5 practical tools you can use starting today to embody Nietzsche's will to power. They're not tricks, they're disciplines, and once they're in place, people will feel your presence before you speak. 1. Define what you actually stand for. You can't rebel if you don't know what you're rebelling for. Most people reject without replacing. They tear down but never build. That's not power. That's noise. So start here. Identify 3 to 5 values that are non-negotiable to you. Not values you inherited, not values you were told to have. Values you chose. Ask yourself, what am I willing to be misunderstood for? What would I do even if no one approved? Write them down. Keep them visible. Let them guide how you speak, decide, and act. This is your internal compass. Without it, rebellion becomes reaction. With it, rebellion becomes leadership. 2. Practice strategic disobedience. You don't have to reject every rule, just the ones that suffocate you. And you do it with precision, not drama. Pick one norm in your life that no longer fits. Maybe it's replying to messages instantly. Maybe it's always being available. Maybe it's staying in a job that drains you. Choose one, then break it quietly, consistently, and without apology. If someone asks why, you don't need to justify. You simply say, that no longer aligns with how I live. You're not rebelling for rebellion's sake. You're editing your life to reflect your values. That's power. Quiet, intentional, undeniable. 3. Master the pause. Most people react. Rebels pause. The pause is where control lives. Before you answer a question, pause. Before you say yes, pause. Before you react emotionally, pause. That single second of space changes everything. It turns a habit into a choice. It signals composure. And in psychology, composure reads as confidence. You don't need to fill silence. Let others feel it. Let your words carry weight. Not because you say more, but because you say what matters, and only that. Try this today. In your next conversation, say less than usual. Watch how others lean in. The rebel doesn't rush. The rebel moves on their own time. 4. Say no without guilt. If you can't say no, your yes means nothing. You don't need to be rude. You don't need to explain. You need to be firm. Try this sentence. Thanks for thinking of me. That doesn't align with what I'm focused on right now. That's it. No defense, no story, just clarity. The more you say no to what drains you, the more space you create for what builds you. Most people fear no because they think it causes rejection, but in truth, it signals strength.
People might resist at first, but eventually they respect those who protect their boundaries. Every yes is a trade. Make sure yours are worth it. 5. Create something instead of consuming everything. Nothing reclaims power like creation. Rebellion is not only about what you refuse, it's about what you build in its place. Instead of scrolling for 30 minutes, write something. Sketch, plan, cook, record a thought. Start a micro business. Build a newsletter for 10 people. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you're producing instead of absorbing. Because creation forces clarity. It forces you to ask, what do I think? What do I believe? And that is Nietzsche's will to power in action. You stop echoing. You start originating. The rebel doesn't just reject culture, they build counterculture. Start small, but start. Reclaim your creative space. Let's recap. Know what you stand for. Break the right rules. Own the silence. Protect your time. Make something of your own. If you do these 5 things consistently, you don't need to ask for respect. You will command it. Not because you chase attention, but because you no longer need it. This is how the rebel becomes magnetic. Not by force, by alignment. Next, we close with something more personal. The cost of walking this path and the deeper freedom on the other side of it.
The rebel's reward. Why you must walk alone to be truly seen. Not everyone will understand you. If you choose to live by your own values, if you choose rebellion over obedience, clarity over compliance, you will confuse people. You will threaten those who've never questioned their path. You may even lose the ones who like the older, quieter version of you. But that's the price. And the reward? It's not fame, not applause, it's freedom. The kind of freedom that lives in your bones, that doesn't flinch under pressure, that doesn't ask for validation, that simply is.
Nietzsche knew what most people forget, that truth doesn't need to shout, that real power doesn't follow crowds, and that becoming who you are will cost you who you were. He wrote, "You must become your own master and carve your name with your own knife." The path of the rebel is lonely at first, but eventually it attracts those who've also stopped pretending.
And that's when something incredible happens. You stop performing. You stop chasing. You start living. So, here's your challenge. Rewatch the 5 tools. Pick one. Live it for 7 days. No delay, no half effort. Just quiet, disciplined rebellion. Let it shape how you speak, choose, and respond. Let people see the edge in your clarity. Let yourself feel the weight of walking without a script. And when you do, come back here. Share what changed. If this message struck something in you, share it with one person who's been shrinking themselves to stay safe. They may need it more than you think. And in the comments, finish this sentence. I'm done following the rule that says. Because when you name the rule, you break its power. If you want more than noise, if you're here for truth, strength, and strategy, subscribe. Not for me, for you. So you remember every week what you're really made of. This isn't just a channel. It's a place for those who refuse to live small. You don't need permission. You need vision. And if you're still watching, you already have it. So walk tall, speak less, mean more. You were never meant to fit in. You were meant to be felt.